Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Dr. Ramile Yago and I'll be presenting you Chapter 3 Analysis of Statically Determinate Trusses. So, let us start. Analysis of Statically Determinate Trusses. In this chapter, we will develop the procedures for analyzing statically determinate trusses using the method of joints and the method of sections. First, however, the determinacy and stability of a truss will be discussed. Then, the analysis of three forms of planar trusses will be considered: simple, compound, and complex. Finally, at the end of the chapter, we will consider the analysis of space truss. In Chapter 3.1, the common type of trusses. A truss is a structure composed of slender members, joined together at their endpoints. The members commonly used in construction consist of wooden struts, metal bars, angles, or channels. The joint connections are usually formed by bolting or welding the end of the members to a common plate called a gusset plate, as shown in Figure 3 of 1, or by simply passing a large bolt or pin through each of the members. Planar trusses lie in a single plane and are often used to support roofs and bridges. And also the gusset plate is used to connect 8 members of the truss supporting structure for a water tank. In roof trusses are often used as part of an industrial building frame, such as the one shown in Figure 3 of 2. Here, the roof load is transmitted to a truss at the joints by means of series of purlins. The roof truss, along with its supporting columns, is termed a bent. Ordinarily, roof trusses are supported either by columns of wood, steel, or reinforced concrete, or by masonry walls to keep the bent rigid and thereby capable of resisting horizontal wind force. Knee braces are sometimes used at the supporting columns. The space between adjacent bends is called bay. Bays are economically spaced at about 15 feet or 4.6 meter for spans around 60 feet 18 meter and about 20 feet 6.1 meter for spans of 100 feet 30 meter. Bays are often tied together using diagonal bracing in order to maintain rigidity of the building structure. So these are the common types of roof trusses. Trusses used to support the roof are selected on the basis of the span, the slope, and the roof material. Some of the more common type of trusses used are shown in Figure 3 of 3. In particular, the scissors truss Figure 3 of 3A can be used for short spans that require overhead clearance. The Howe and Pratt trusses Figure 3 of 3B and 3 of 3C are used for roofs of moderate span about 60 feet 18 meter to 100 feet 30 meter. If larger spans are required to support the roof, the fan truss or fink truss may be used. Figures 3 of 3D and 3 of 3E. These trusses may be built with a cambered bottom chord such as that shown in Figure 3 of 3F. If a flat roof or nearly flat roof is to be selected, the Warren truss Figure 3 of 3G is often used. Also, the Howe and Pratt trusses may be modified for flat roofs. Sawtooth trusses Figure 3 of 3H are often used where column spacing is not objectionable and uniform lighting is important. A textile mill would be an example. The bowstring truss figure 3 of 3I is something selected for garage and small airplane hangars, and the arch truss figure 3 of 3J, although relatively expensive, can be used for high rises and long spans such as field houses, gymnasium, and so on. Bridge trusses, the main structural element of a typical bridge truss, are shown in figure 3 of 4. Here it is seen that a load on the deck is first transmitted to stringers, then to floor beams, and finally to the joints of the two supporting side trusses. The top-bottom chords of these side trusses are connected by top and bottom lateral bracing, which serves to resist the lateral forces caused by wind and the sideway caused by moving vehicles on the bridge. Additionally, stability is provided by the portal and sway bracing, as in the case of many long span trusses. A roller is provided at one end of a bridge truss to allow for thermal expansion. These are the common types of bridge trusses. A few of typical forms of bridge trusses currently used for single spans are shown in figure 3 of 5 in particular. The Pratt, Howe, and Warren trusses are normally used for spans up to 200 feet (61 meters) in length. The most common form is the Warren truss with verticals, figure 3 of 5C. For larger spans, a truss with a polygonal upper chord, such as the Parker truss, figure 3 of 5D, is used for some savings in material. The Warren truss with vertical can also be fabricated in this manner for spans up to 300 feet (91 meters). The greatest economy of material is obtained if the diagonals have a slope between 45 degree and 60 degree with the horizontal. If this rule is maintained, then for spans greater than 300 feet (91 meters) in depth of the truss must increase, and consequently the panels will get longer. This results in a heavy deck system, and to keep the weight of the deck within tolerable limits, subdivided trusses have been developed. Typical examples include the Baltimore and subdivided Warren trusses, figures 3 of 5E and 3 of 5F. Finally, the K-truss shown in the figure 3 of 5G can also be used in place of a subdivided truss, since it accomplishes the same purpose. Assumptions for design. To design both the members and the connection of a truss, it is first necessary to determine the force developed in each member when the truss is subjected to a given loading. In this regard, two important assumptions will be made in order to idealize the truss. So for the first one, the members are joined together by smooth pins. In case where bolt or welded joint connections are used, this assumption is generally satisfactory provided the center lines of the joining members are concurrent at a point, as in figure 3 of 1. It should be realized, however, that the actual connection do give some rigidity to the joint, and this in turn introduces bending of the connected members when the truss is subjected to a load. the bending stress developed in the members is called secondary stress, whereas the stress in the members of the idealized truss having pin-connected joints is called primary stress. The secondary stress analysis of a truss can be performed using a computer as discussed in chapter 16. For some types of truss geometries, these stresses may be large. For the second, all loadings are applied at the joints. In most situations, such as for bridge and roof trusses, this assumption is true. Frequently, in the first analysis, the weight of the members is neglected since the force supported by the members is large in comparison with their weight. If the weight is to be included in the analysis, it is generally satisfactory to apply it as a vertical force half of its magnitude, applied at each end of the member. Because of these two assumptions, each truss member acts as an axial force member, and therefore the forces acting at the ends of the member must be directed along the axis of the member. If the force tends to elongate the member, it is a tensile force, figure 3 of 6a, whereas if the force tends to shorten the member, it is compressive force, figure 3 of 6b. In the actual design of a truss, it is important to state whether the force is tensile or compressive. Most often, compression members must be made thicker than tension members because of the buckling or sudden instability that may occur in compression members. And that's all for the chapter 3.1, common type of trusses. Thank you for watching, and wassalam.